We need to start with a Democratic blame game. Because if you're like us, this is delicious.
Oh, it's been so fun.
It's true, you know. At least if you listen to some of the punditry coming from conservatives.
Oh, not those folks.
Even from some Democratic operatives eager to find celebs to push into the middle of their current circular firing squad.
And here's the funny thing is, conservatives started pointing out that the Harris campaign was spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on these concerts of these celebrities.
Dude, but the funniest thing is they did that huge rally with Beyonce in Houston, I think it was.
Sing?
She didn't even sing. She didn't even sing. So you paid a premium to get the Beyonce there, and then you're like, you know what? The main act is Kamala Harris.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Good Tuesday to you. Golly, welcome back to the Ruthless Variety Program. I'm Josh Holmes, comfortably smug. Michael Duncan, John Ashbrook, left or right across your radio dial. As always, it's been a hell of a week. I know that you, along with us, have dealt with a lot of, well, shall we say, terrific emotion.
Yeah, it's felt pretty great over the past week.
It has. It's, you know, I found myself like Thursday or Friday of last week. You know, you're tired. You put everything you can put into all of this stuff. In like this, one of the sides of my face, it was like kind of cramping. I'm like, Jesus, am I having a stroke?
Is it Bell's palsy
Yeah,
situation?
no, I was like, what, is this like a health emergency? So I kind of looked in the mirror. I realized it's just because I've been smiling. That's all it was. I've been literally have been smiling for now 7 straight days. I know you guys have too, and everybody who's listening is kind of in the same boat. It's unbelievable, you know, and we're going to get down to some serious stuff. We'll talk about a whole bunch, and we're going to have some fun on this episode too. But fellas, it's been a pretty good week, huh?
Yeah, I think the Germans have a word for a week like this, and that is a celebration of Schadenfreude.
Yes, they do.
You know, the Democrats are imploding, blaming each other, all of this sort of stuff. And it's just great to finally get a chance to sit back and watch it all. I don't think I've ever consumed so much MSNBC in my life.
Never. The View is appointment viewing.
Yes.
You know, that wild show that they have on CNN with Abby Phillips.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it's called. Appointment viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called therapy is what it is.
Oh, it's like if you haven't checked this thing out, like look at some of the clips. You don't want to watch the whole thing because I think that probably does brain damage over time. But like if you just look at the clips of what it is that they're talking about, like it's soul reinforcing.
I mean, the exchange that Scott Jennings had with that lib reporter where he's like, you still don't understand why you lost. And she's like, why are you saying me? I'm not a Democrat.
I'm a journo.
Scott's like, okay.
Okay. No, I mean, it's everywhere. We're going to get into all of that. There's a blame game that's going on.
Which we predicted, I would point out.
Yep.
We talked about this about, 4 straight months.
Yeah.
About how if Kamala Harris comes up short, the Democratic Party is going to be in a state of which is unrecognizable to many of you, where they have this monolithic information flow of what it is that they do, and they're unable to control it.
Right.
That's happening.
Things fall apart.
Things fall apart.
They're in the fetal position, and that's exactly where we need to keep them.
That's exactly right. We're going to talk about a bunch of things that I think would ultimately keep them where they're at, and then we're going to make fun of them along the way. You guys good with that?
Yes.
Have some laughs?
Absolutely.
Have some yucks? We will talk a little bit about what's next, and you'll notice the anxiety on the conservative side after putting everything that you have possibly put in to this election that has ultimately come up roses. The day after, there's a whole bunch of discussion about, you know, who goes into the cabinet, what staff is where. Everybody's sort of jockeying around, and then there's like Senate leadership stuff to discuss, a little bit of House leadership stuff, and like the anxiety kind of creeped back in there. We're going to put that all in context for you too, and give you, I think, a little something to just hopefully help enjoy the holidays with, because as you know, we're big fans of Thanksgiving.
Huge.
Here
And
on
this
the
one is
Friday.
going to be an
It's
all-timer.
gonna be so good.
You know, and like we've made it a 4-year tradition of giving you exactly what it is that we think you need on Thanksgiving, how to deal with your family. We're going to do that again. This time around, I think we're going to have some party favors for people that they can order. We just, as I walked in here, Drew told me that we've placed an order for something for your table for Thanksgiving.
It's going to be so great. I mean, I am really looking forward to this Thanksgiving. First of all, because I'm going to be hosting family,
Oh, yeah.
and you better believe these are going to be on the table.
Oh yeah. So we have some napkins that we'll show you next episode because we just placed the order. But it's basically a county by county electoral map of what last Tuesday looked like, and well, your lib relatives aren't going to appreciate it. It's a nice conversation starter.
Yeah.
That can help you along your way, and we'll give you a lot more guidance, shall we say, after that. But I think it's a nice place to start. We'll have that up in the store as soon as this week that you guys can get into and look at that. We will have some variety. And then another thing that we've talked about, we touched on this last week, but there were so many things to talk about that we didn't put a granular point on, was the Latino vote and how we'd been making incremental progress in the Latino vote nationwide, particularly in those multi-generational Hispanic communities. But you almost had a 50-50 split in this election, which is
Incredible.
that's when the dam breaks on stuff. Like, you can make progress over time by your commitment to going and listening to people, but when the dam breaks, and you realize that, like, libs ain't got nothing for you.
Yep. I mean, like, number one, it's 100%, and it's clear as day obvious to folks, especially on our side, who don't live in this lib information silo that they've locked themselves in of madness, where the libs are like, so Latinos are white supremacists now, right? Whereas we on this show and every other reasonable conservative has seen that, okay, these people, this Latino community cares about the same issues as all Americans because it's about issues that matter to Americans.
Right.
Let's not try to divide and conquer among
they
races.
have families, they have jobs,
Let's
they care
offer
about all that.
solutions.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like when voters say the number one issue is like economics and a secure border, turns out Latino voters number 1 and 2 are economics, secure borders, and those are like, it's the white supremacy.
And the libs are like a half step away from, like, they look different, and different is bad.
Yeah.
They're like a half step away from that. We're helping to put them in that corner, but we're going to talk to Jose Mallea, who is the CEO of Libre. They did an amazing amount of work, and they've done that over the last 15 years in getting into these Hispanic communities and providing us real insight over a period of time. He gives us an idea of where this whole thing is going and their accomplishments. Hey, you got to take a little victory lap.
Yeah, you put in the work, you
You
should.
gotta take a little bit. So we got all of that and more.
This holiday season, millions of families across America will rely on credit card rewards to visit their loved ones. So why are D.C. politicians trying to pass a bill that would end credit card rewards, making it more expensive for families to be together? The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill is a big government handout to corporate megastores that makes them more money, but eliminates travel rewards for you. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
We need to start with the Democratic blame game. Because if you're like us, this is delicious.
Oh, it's been so fun.
And there's no consultant, maybe in the history of American politics, who's become more famous over the years than James Carville, mostly because he's so outspoken, he's got a colorful character. But because of his Clinton 1992 win, if you win for the Democrats, you just are famous.
Yeah, well, and then it was immortalized in that documentary War Room, and which I actually recommend.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great.
Good watch.
It's great. Like, outcome notwithstanding, it's a great thing to watch. Anyway, he weighs in on what he blames for the actual loss here. In clip number 1, please, Spaghettis.
And I think if this campaign is reducible to one moment, we're in a 65% wrong track country. The country wants something different. And she's asked is so often the case in a friendly audience on The View, how would you be different than Biden? That's the one question that you exist to answer.
Spit on his
All right?
lip.
That is it. That's the money question. That's the one you want. That's the one that everybody wants to know the answer to.
Glasses are cockeyed.
And you freeze. You literally freeze and say, well, I can't think of anything. And once you get in it, so we said 65% want something different. We are just not going to give in to them, but maybe the odiousness of Trump combined with the Dobbs decision, we can overcome it. Well, we didn't overcome it. But when we go back and history unearths this, it's going to be right there on The View. And I think her name was Sunny Houston or whatever. Ask the question. And that's the most devastating answer you could imagine.
Another reason why Carville is sort of revered.
Yeah.
He does sort of get it.
He says the obvious thing. And we pointed this out after we played that clip, I think, a month ago when she did the interview. And we're like, if her campaign goes down on Election Day, everyone's going to point back to her inability to answer that question as the thing that did it. And he points that out.
Yeah. Also, just love watching Tim Miller do the interview there.
Yeah.
Like we've played him. He's been a contestant on King of the Hill before. He was he
was a Huntsman guy.
Oh, yeah.
Just his whole career has been spent backstabbing Republicans, essentially.
Yeah, essentially. But now he's got this podcast where it's essentially all liberal. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to see like the supercuts of him and Bill Kristol watching Election Day results.
No. Oh, I got to go and see that.
You got to get
worth
online
watching.
and see it. It's like watching the blood drain out of their face slowly and surely, and understanding that the constituency that they represent does not exist in America.
That's another thing is like this election exposed this whole like never Trump grifter group as the utterly worthless bunch of scum that they are. There is no constituency for them whatsoever. They have no impact on getting any voters on their side. This has come to an end.
Yeah,
and they're struggling to have any kind of relevancy.
I have noticed this on CNN, on MSNBC, that is one of the gut check things that the Democrats are dealing with after this election is, maybe we platformed a lot of people who have no actual constituency. Maybe Kamala Harris shouldn't have closed her campaigning with Liz Cheney. You know, it is remarkable that they are sort of like, they've entertained this idea that these people, these Bill Kristols and everything, have been entirely propped up in the Trump era by Arabella advisors and this dark money network to get on television.
Yes.
And they basically live in green rooms on CNN and they have no real jobs.
It's a financial decision.
It's a financial decision that they don't actually know voters. They haven't talked to voters, and there is no constituency for it.
Turns out they're just Democrats talking to Democrats.
Yeah.
And specifically this Tim Miller guy, I want to also point out something important.
I love that you're going in here.
So he used to be on Pod Save America, which is a left-wing, again, a Soros-funded podcast.
People want to
they hate us. They're so mad at us because we call them out and we've made them look like clowns.
Well, yeah, people always want to be like, oh, so you guys are like the pod bros of the right. And there's nothing more offensive than you can say to us.
Because like they've had venture capital funding, they've gotten funding from Soros, and as an aside, like libs are like, why is it that conservative and right wing podcasts are so well funded by like billionaires, while the left isn't? What are you talking about?
That was your tweet, right?
Yeah,
Duncan.
So we bootstrapped this thing ourselves for 4 years.
But it wasn't at the point where you were making like Taylor Lorenz said something like, oh, well, it's a podcast election, and what the right has done so much better is figure out how to fund a bunch of things, and like meanwhile, everything off the left, whether it's Tim Miller's situation or the Pod Save Bros or all that stuff, it's all venture capital backed by left-wing donors.
Yeah, or it's a patronage model by left-wing billionaires. You know what I mean? And they own everything.
And so this guy, Tim Miller, would go on Pod Save, and he was like the Never Trumper, their feature. I kid you not, the name of his segment was it The Cuck Show? The Cuck like they would call him a cuck to his face, and he was happy to dance along to that. Then, because I guess he spoke out against Soros or a company he worked for did, and they called him an anti-Semite and kicked him out. I mean, now it's clear it's because, well, you can't call our funder say he's funding Democrats. You can't say his name. So they kick him out, and then they bring him back to do the cuck show some more, and he's okay with this. Like, and this is a guy who
living up to the name.
Like, how are you thinking this guy can represent or tell you anything about voters? This
now
is the
watch
outcome
us
you get.
do this, Tim.
Yeah.
Now watch us do this.
So he's getting his comeuppance. Anyone who listened to him, you look like a fool. You look like a fool right now.
I will tell you, there is a friend of the program, and forgive me for not remembering his name, but he tweeted on top of one of these, there are all these stories written about how podcasts are changing media, and so many voters listen to podcasts like ours and voted for Trump because of it. And this guy quote tweeted and said, "I guess pods really did save America."
Oh man. Well, I mean, look, before we get into this pod save clip because of who they're blaming, I will say we touched on this on Thursday, but there were hundreds of thousands of you that went out and voted early and got all of your people. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from people in the media, people from the punditry, from the campaigns and whatnot, saying they think that it made a real difference. I know that you all make a big difference. We're not going to take any credit for that here in the variety program, but know that you're part of a community that did make a big difference.
That's the thing. Is that, like, leading up to election, I kept saying that we've got 100,000, millions of listeners at this point, and we have asked, please vote early, and it's you folks who are listening to this right now that got Trump elected. Mm-hmm. You went and you did your job. You saved this country. Everyone listening right now, you should be doing backflips, taking a victory lap, because it's you folks who delivered.
Yeah, 100%. But here's how the pod bros see this in clip number 2, please, Spaghettis.
Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake. It just was. Yeah. And he and his inner circle, they refused to believe the polls. They refused to believe he was unpopular. They refused to acknowledge until very late that anyone could be upset about inflation, and they just kept telling us that his presidency was historic and it was the greatest economy ever. We just heard him again say that it's the greatest economy ever. Clearly, 70, 80% of voters don't believe that. They don't believe that about their own personal financial situation, but they just keep telling us that. And then after the debate, the Biden people told us that the polls were fine, and Biden was still the strongest candidate. They were privately telling reporters at the time that Kamala Harris couldn't win. So they were shivving Kamala Harris to reporters while they told everyone else, not a time for an open process, and his vice president can't win, so he's the strongest candidate. Then we find out, when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign, that the Biden campaign's own internal polling, at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate, showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes. That's what their own internal polling said.
All right, so
let's break this down.
A few observations. First of all, would it kill that guy to mix a cold beer in? It's like nothing but jogging and kale salad. You know? I mean, it's just like, whatever. Hard to relate to. But the reason that they're so upset is because they were the tip of the spear in trying to dislodge Joe Biden from this election. The Pod Save Bros with Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, ultimately George Clooney, in a Hollywood elite.
I mean, think about that nexus right there. That's who's calling the shots on their side?
Yeah.
So these guys who actually never been practitioners in the field, they served in an Obama, like the guy that you were just listening to, Favreau, he wrote speeches for Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Right? That's like being the guy who answers the phones at SpaceX saying that you're like launching rockets into space.
Listen,
like that's just, you don't, anyway.
I carried Tiger Woods' golf bag, so I know.
I mean, it just is what it, like that's his claim to fame. But as a non-practitioner in the field, it was their expertise that gave everyone the motivation to say, like, after that debate, Joe Biden needs to leave. They were thinking this for a while. And they used their platform and everything to get Joe Biden out without a plan to replace Joe Biden, right? I mean, remember, we've been talking about this for 2 years, about how, and Johnny, you in particular, we're saying there's absolutely no chance that this guy makes it to Election Day 2024. Like, this is something we've known.
Yeah. Yeah, we called it very early on this show because we saw...
Ashbrook was the first.
He was.
I'm serious. He was the very first person anywhere to call it.
I remember early on in the cycle, I spoke at a conference in Florida, and I laid it out just to sort of test the waters. This is a conference of people who were not all conservatives. A lot of libs in this audience, and they laughed.
Yeah.
And it was funny at the time. It was a punchline at the time, but you knew that it was
They're all
certainly
kinda
possible. And they were all kind of thinking, how do we get ourselves out of this situation?
But they didn't have a backup plan. And so, like, the condensed calendar, I don't know that they could come up with one. But the point is, like, if you rewind the tape a little bit, it's important to understand how it is that they get into this situation. 2022 was supposed to be a bloodbath for Democrats. You had a horrible economy, horrible inflation, borders were rampant, crime was everywhere. American people, both in polling and in the exit polls of that election, I might add, agreed with them entirely. Now, Republicans did a terrible job at recruiting candidates that could convey that message, and ultimately lost a bunch of very, very winnable seats. Now, you picked up the House, so it wasn't all lost, but it was supposed to be one of those big red wave elections. It provided Biden insulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It provided him a moment.
That's a good point.
Where the Democratic glitterati was like, well, maybe this guy's got some magic here that we're just not seeing. That maybe we just got to ride this horse a little bit longer. In fact, he beat Donald Trump. And if they're going to nominate Donald Trump, I think he'll probably do it again. Because remember, we went back to what we talked about with their thesis, which was he can't get above 48 in all these states no matter what. We just have to have a binary choice. And as long as we do that, and Joe Biden is our binary choice, kind of doesn't matter what shape he's in. He can provide the 50.
Yeah, but turns out, like, when you leave the primary voters out of that conversation, then you make a switch the last minute and have no real nomination, even a truncated nomination fight, like, the voters feel like they were shortchanged. And it's like a lot of people complained about that Republican primary, and I know because I took a lot of heat because all these people ran against Donald Trump. Well, that's how he won, folks.
Yep, that's how he won.
I'd point out that's how he won. If you want to look at all of these states in which people showed up for the first time and changed their registration to the Republican Party in these places, the reason why they did that was because there was a Republican primary.
Yeah.
They wanted to get involved in the process, and the Democrats didn't have that. It's like they... The whole thing, I 100% agree, Holmes, that, like, it bought Biden more time, but it's sort of like, you know, that Bane quote in Batman where it's like, peace cost you your strength, victory defeated you. That's what it is. Because Democrats didn't have that red wave come in on Biden's doorstep in 2022. They learned all the wrong lessons.
Yep. Yeah.
And they thought they could figure it out for 24.
They thought status quo was enough.
Yeah.
It was the way that Barack Obama learned in 2010.
Yeah.
He figured it out.
The shellacking.
Once he got that shellacking, he was like, okay. But Biden never
Back to
had
war
to learn
footing.
that lesson. And also, this snake, John Favreau, right? That he's like, oh, the Biden people, they told us. You were telling all your listeners that Joe Biden is a genius. When he's in private, Joe Biden, he's doing cartwheels. The guy's running marathons.
Yeah, this is all retrospect. I mean, these guys, they're not a single. If Joe Biden never got out of that race and he eked this thing out, they would have been talking about the genius of Joe Biden in a consistent through line from November of 2020 on. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be like, oh yeah, no, he was clearly diminished. He was good. All of that became evident to all of them once they realized he couldn't win, which is the only thing they cared about.
And then they did the same thing with Kamala. They're like, yeah, Kamala, look at the vibes. It's Brat Summer. She's definitely going to win. This encapsulates the problem on the left is they can't tell the truth to their listeners.
Yeah.
They've convinced their listeners that men and women don't even fucking exist.
Right.
So how are they going to be able to tell them, well, look, here's the situation. We're about to get...
You got to have the hard conversation.
Right.
Look, later in the show, we're going to have a hard conversation.
Right.
But you got to have that because people need to understand how this whole... If everything's good all the time, right up until the point it's not, and you're like, but this is good again? And you don't consult anybody on that. Nobody votes. Nobody talks about it. Like, it ain't going to work.
Wait, but
the
you
buy-in's not there.
You consulted George Clooney, and
Well,
that's what matters.
Hollywood elite
Also,
seemed very happy.
think about a nightmare blunt rotation that would be. John Favreau, George Clooney, and Barack Obama. God, I wouldn't want to be in that room.
a nightmare blunt rotation.
Well, that's what the kids call it. That's what the kids call it.
There is no clear path for Democrats to get out of this death spiral. Remember what they did to the state of Iowa. They removed it from their nominating process. So, and why did they remove it from the nominating process? So that California libs would have an easier shot at the nomination. So they will not learn any lesson of how to talk to any regular old person out in flyover country because there is no incentive to do it. In 2028, they are set up to nominate someone just as out of touch as Kamala Harris, and maybe we'll get lucky and they nominate her again.
Yeah, I mean, look, I learned this back in 2002 when I first started paying attention to politics. Democrats had a New Jersey Senate race back when those things, they could be competitive from time to time. Actually, could be competitive in the future if you look at these election results. And they had Torricelli. The Torch. Senator Torricelli. He was accused of unspeakable crimes.
It's kind of a New Jersey senator thing.
Right, it is kind of. Yeah, it is kind of. It seems like a tradition, maybe a decade or so.
A tradition unlike any other.
But they rode this guy through thick and thin, through all the allegations, and then all of a sudden there were a couple of polls in late September of 2002 that showed that this guy Doug Forrester, who was a Republican lawmaker, was actually beating him because the weight of all the allegations against Torricelli were ultimately coming to fruition. And they just straight cut the ballot, pulled him out, put former Senator Lautenberg in, and changed the laws of New Jersey from a state legislative standpoint to accommodate a new name on the ballot in the last 30 days. And then, of course, they won the election, right? This is what they do. Mm-hmm. This is so they're used to this. They haven't had to do it in a presidential election, but this didn't come. This wasn't something novel in the Democratic playbook. They're like, oh, yeah, well, that guy doesn't work anymore. I understand we already crossed all the primaries and nobody had to vote for it. But, we'll just pull that one out and plug the second one in and they'll all vote for us anyway because that's what happens.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is the disregard they have for their voters.
Totally.
Just and the way that they did it so brazenly in front of everyone there would even be an occasional attempt by an anchor to ask Nancy Pelosi. They're like, a lot of people are saying there's no primary. And Nancy's just like, the people decided it's Kamala Harris.
We've had a very robust process. Is that way
do you remember when she straight faced was like, this was a bottom up process? Her and Schumer. Schumer got in front of the cameras and called this a bottom up process. It's like, bro, you went in secret to Biden's house.
It wasn't until the Variety program even reported it.
It's real bottom up.
Well, bottom up stuff. But look, I mean, you go through some of this stuff, and The Hill has something about the blame game, and they're going back and forth on all these 100-day sprint. What you hear some people who are like, well, we just didn't have enough time. Mm-hmm. No, you had too much time. That was the problem. Mm-hmm. If the election was Labor Day, you could have won. But as predicted on the Variety program, at some point the flashbang goes away and somebody's going to ask, what would you do differently? We said this.
Straight up.
We said this on the Variety program. What would you do differently? And they don't have good answers for that. Well, lo and behold.
There it is.
I didn't expect it coming from Sonny Hostin, but lo and behold. I mean, that was ultimately their undoing. She's rolling out tax breaks for racial groups in the last week of the election, expecting a wholesale convert. Oh, I didn't know you were going to give me everything for free. Oh, great. Great. I mean, they didn't know what they were doing from the very beginning. Time was not their ally.
No.
I mean, the more time, the worse. But then, the other thing we talked about, they're all talking about, well, Tim Walz. I can't blame those people. They might be right about that. We talked about how ridiculous it was to try to pick somebody other than the governor of a state that you had to have who had a 67% approval rating in that state, who happened to be amongst the most talented Democrats that they had in the party. And they but he's Jewish.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
Can't be Josh Shapiro.
And let's be honest, this is all of these sort of things have written through oh, it wasn't a good fit and they made a mistake by going with Tim Walz or whatever. No. They went with Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro because they were actually afraid that they would upset the Palestinian Hamas caucus. They thought that they would lose Michigan if they had a Jewish person on the ticket. That's the kind of thing that loses you elections.
What happened in Michigan? I can't remember.
Another an L there too, right? But they roll this clown out, and they're like, oh, yeah, no, he's a football coach. He's a war hero. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know. He's a volunteer assistant defensive coordinator, and he never served in a theater of combat. So, like...
he knows the pick six play.
Yeah.
They tried to run that.
the pick six play, which he did with
AOC, yeah, Twitch stream playing Madden. Hilarious.
One of the most forced, ridiculous things that you'll ever see in your
Yeah,
life.
it's like Donald Trump's going on Rogan and getting like 40 million views, and they're like, "Here, let's run the pick six play on Twitch."
They played half a game of Madden and it ended 0-0. Did you see that?
0-0.
They were getting dunked on so hard, and nobody deserved it more.
The last thing that I want to cover on this, in terms of what it is that they done, you're only going to get this in the variety program, is there was no discussion whatsoever during the course of the fall months about a potential money problem for Kamala Harris. In fact, it was quite the opposite. They were rolling out that she'd raise $1 billion. It is a money juggernaut. The cash advantage that she has is absolutely ridiculous. And then I would like march into Duncan's office, a couple of offices down, and we'd talk about it, and he'd show me the numbers of what it is that they're doing on digital advertising, which they spend an enormous amount of money on, smartly, except for the fact that their targeting was next to nothing.
Yeah, it was like 18 plus. And they were coming in late, and so they were paying premium CPMs. Like CPM is a cost per 1,000 impressions. It's like how you buy media on the internet. And they were spraying like a shotgun, and they were paying more to do that. And Republicans were like using a scalpel and being smart and reserving media ahead of time, so they were paying less.
So tell me, what was your first inclination that they were not totally efficient in this area?
But don't give away any secrets that they could learn from.
Yeah, I mean...
Because Duncan actually, he
'Cause you
figured out
came
some
to me with-
genius stuff.
Well,
but I don't want him
I'm
to...
not sharing
don't
any of
let
the
Dems
genius
know.
stuff. I'm not sharing any of the genius stuff because they listen to this stuff. They hate
Yeah.
listening to it. But like, I remember you coming to me during the Olympics.
It was the Olympics. It was the Olympics when, Republican groups had preemptively locked in battleground inventory during the Olympics on Peacock. You're paying like a $50, $60 CPM, and then Kamala has to come in after a few days of seeing it run through the weekend, and it's only Republicans who've got all the airplay, and they had to go in national and spend way, way, way more money than they had to because they were taking a rash of shit from everybody being like, what the heck? You're the candidate now, and it's only Republicans on the Olympics bashing you. And so, like, that felt like their entire media strategy was reactive to what Republicans had planned for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems when you switch candidates out midstream is like, they were canceling inventory and then having to rebook it constantly. And so, yeah, I mean, Future Forward had a ton of money, but they ended up spending it way more inefficiently than we did.
For those of you who are sort of laymen and not in the field, particularly on digital, and I'm convinced that we're a cycle removed, maybe 2 cycle removed from nobody doing television advertising, because what you can get in inventory from a digital and addressable, like you're sending it to TV sets. And I'm not saying when you think of digital, you think of like Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever. Digital, as it's commonly now sort of accepted in the Republican world and probably all of the political world, it includes TV, but it's addressable TV in
Right.
that, your television set is known, right? There's inventory for your specific...
Yeah, because nobody's buying, no one's just buying broadcast television spots anymore. People are getting, their television through streaming, through like logged in environments in apps on their smart TV. And so we can layer a voter file over a state and buy connected TV inventory and over the top, commonly known as OTT inventory, directly on the voter file.
Yeah.
And so you can be extremely targeted with all of that inventory, and it's running on a television. It's not just running on your phone or on your tablet or on your computer.
Although it's running there too.
It is.
And that's like the thing that came. So all of this, as we got through the cycle, I was like, man, they have such a huge cash advantage. They're outspending us everywhere. But every time I would walk into Duncan's office, I'd be like, yeah, but they're not back-ending it with any data. I mean, if your target universe is 18 plus nationwide, like that's a lot of people who are getting your ads.
Well, yeah, you're spending a lot more to be very inefficient to basically blanket, every state. And meanwhile, like I could show you the data of, the swing voter universes or like working class women or all of these subgroups that we were targeting and showing you 10, 14x frequencies on a weekly basis in all the swing states for spending a fraction of the money.
They had more money than sense.
Yeah.
I mean, and real quick, just on that specific subject is, you've now seen a major fundraiser for the Democrat Party. I believe it was on Fox News. They went on Saturday morning, and they said that their donors are outraged because Jen O'Malley Dillon from the Biden campaign told her and her donors, "I guarantee Kamala's going to win. Cut us the biggest checks you can." And those donors came in, and now you see, as Duncan has described, they were spending money like a drunken sailor, without any sense behind it. They didn't target. They're like, "Oh, we got $1 billion. Let's just spend it all." And they did that and more, listener. They're now $20 million in debt, and now we're being told that the Biden or the Harris campaign, I mean, they're the same thing. They're $20 million in the hole, and they are shopping the list of their emails of their supporters and donors to try and rent that out for $20 million.
Smug, it gets even worse. The Kamala Harris campaign spent $100,000 building a set for her appearance on Call Her Daddy, and they got less views than our JD fishing clips.
Yeah. I mean, that is the good contrast point we're talking about here.
There it is.
Because on the other side, you had like people like Taylor Budovich and Alex Bruschwitz and Pfeiffer and all of those guys within the Trump campaign that identified a demo of low propensity voters that had audiences, mass audiences with a bunch of different places, podcast hosts. And it didn't take them a damn dime, not a single cent, to make sure that their candidate, that Donald Trump, who was very good in those things, go sit down and address them and be the first people and the only people that ultimately talked to that demo. So you can spend $1 billion on 18 plus. Or if you have somebody who's actually thinking about how to make $1 out of 15 cents, you can find a demo that you're supposed to target. You go use the most valuable resource that you have in a campaign, which is the candidate's time, and you go lock it in. And in the end, look at what happened.
I mean, that was so sharp of Bruschwitz, and I've read that Barron was also talking with Bruschwitz, and they worked out this plan of like, okay, let's deploy President Trump.
I want to hear from those. We need to have those guys on.
Yeah.
We need to have
Barron. If you're listening, come on, Bruschwitz.
Like, I don't know if Barron does this stuff.
Let's get the Barron and Bruschwitz episode.
I think they need to come on because I need to know what. Look, we know because it's on our line of work, unbeknownst to us, we know who's listening and how you're listening, and that's a demographic that honestly that Kamala Harris never talked to.
Yep.
Okay, so we mentioned in the previous segment George Clooney and his critical role. You'll recall that he wrote that, was it a Wall Street Journal op-ed?
It was New York Times.
New York Times op-ed. Yeah, New York Times. Yeah, it can't be Wall Street Journal. They actually would screen for idiocy. The New York Times published this op-ed right after the debate that everybody was like, "Oh, Joe Biden doesn't have it anymore," and he's like, "Well, I know because I hosted fundraiser. You're right, he doesn't have it. I saw it, and he hasn't had it for months." And it began this galvanization that the Pod Bros and the Obama team and Pelosi and ultimately Schumer used to sort of push the old man out and get Kamala Harris back in. So it turns out now that didn't work out at all. The Daily Mail reports that George Clooney is taking a step back from politics after being made a scapegoat for Kamala Harris's loss.
I mean, that's a shame. I think he did his part.
He
should jump in and pick more candidates.
It's like the Hollywood equivalent of deleting your Twitter account.
It is. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Well, thank you, Joy. Nobody asked you to talk about it in the first place, but there you were. George Clooney feels like he was being used as a scapegoat in a furious blame game over what could have cost Kamala Harris the election and will now take a step back from politics. The Hollywood star, 63, threw his support behind Harris after penning a blistering op-ed why Joe Biden would cost the Democrats if he abandoned his campaign, and if it wasn't enough to prevent a historic victory against Donald Trump. So, like, look, they're looking for every reason but themselves. And, like, it couldn't happen to a better. This guy stuck his head up. Was like, I'll do it. I'll be the guy that pens the op-ed. And, like, for months, he was hailed as a savior of the Democratic Party. Like, thank God. There's a man with star power.
In hindsight, thinking about that, they're like, thank you, George Clooney, for giving us Kamala Harris. Like, just think about that.
The person who like appreciates this the most is like Cindy Lou Who.
Yeah.
She's like, it was George. It wasn't me.
She's like, that guy's the guy.
Yeah.
Did you know she has a Twitter account?
No.
Yes. Cindy Lou Who in Pennsylvania has a Twitter account. And she was tweeting this stuff of like, yeah, things are looking good in Pennsylvania.
Oh, no.
I don't think she's tweeted in a while.
No, you mean she didn't actually go dark after that? So if you missed those episodes, we were talking about how hilarious it was in the waning days of the election. The Democrats were trying to find somebody to blame, and they settled on a field staffer in Pennsylvania, where they had like myriads of on-the-record quotes from Democrats being like, yeah, this lady's terrible. Mm-hmm. And it was printed. Laughable proposition that somebody was just like in the field trying to turn out votes is like the real problem.
Right. You spent like $1 billion, but no, it was her fault.
But I figured that would wash her out of the whole thing. Not the case.
No, and so that whole situation got even crazier because like it was local Pennsylvania operatives of the Dem machine in Pennsylvania who were like, this lady Cindy Lou Who, who's like in charge of field in Pennsylvania, hasn't given proper respect to us local Democrats in Pennsylvania. And this was ahead of the election. And then after the election, the Harris campaign's like, oh, we did a good job in Pennsylvania. These corrupt Democrats just wanted more money.
Yeah.
They wanted us to pay them off.
And we called that
this
too.
Is great.
We called that too. We called street money.
Street money.
Or a little walking around money.
Which is something like if you're looking into like election fraud over the years, this is where it resides.
Yeah.
It's the street money game where it's like, course for 25.
Yeah.
I mean, they can turn out a little more. They can use a little more effort. There's a little more cash on the streets. Well, it turns out the cash wasn't running very well in the streets of Philadelphia because Cindy Lou Who took a bath on that. She was maybe playing by the rules. What a shame.
What a shame.
What a shame. Also, credit to the RNC and Watley and everybody else for actually enforcing the laws this time around.
Yeah.
They were all over that shit. And I think, if nothing else, from a Democratic perspective, you knew that the you were being examined on all of this stuff. Probably made it a little less enticing to try to bend rules and try to.
I mean, they tried it in Pennsylvania.
They tried.
And you saw Watley, Laura Trump, they were on it instantly. And won.
Yep. I mean, that was the thing that is underreported. He came on the show and he talked about how we had 176 or whatever lawsuits pending over Election Day that people were going to litigate. They won them. Yep. They won them.
And they had a full plan ahead of time. Remember, we talked to him at the convention. We talked to him before that time, and he said, what we're turning to now is election integrity. We're taking it deadly serious. And he was right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, what they did was amazing, and it was a huge, huge factor.
And when you
in our
do
win.
stuff like that and you communicate it to your, grassroots voters, it builds a trust in the system. Because what did we say? We're like, we will not win this election if Republicans don't get with the program and vote by mail and vote early.
Yep.
And we took a rash of shit for that too.
Yep.
And then, lo and behold, Republicans voted by mail and voted early. And look, we flipped Bucks County.
Yep.
We won Pennsylvania. We won the whole blue wall. We won the election.
Yes.
And it's as simple as that. But that doesn't happen unless you have leadership like the RNC who's leading the fight and explaining to voters how the system works.
Yeah, Watley, Laura Trump, everything underneath, absolutely terrific. Guys like Pressler, who was on the ground doing all of that stuff in Pennsylvania, basically dedicated his life to it, hugely important to the outcome. What I love most, and we'll stick with the celebrity genre for a minute, when you lose, everyone tries to protect their little piece of the pie.
Oh, yeah.
Like the enviros will immediately come out and be like, well, it was because she didn't embrace fracking.
Yeah.
Or anti-fracking.
Yeah.
Right?
She didn't
It's
throw
'cause she
soup at a
walked away
painting.
from that, right? And like the immigration people, well, it's because they enforce stringent border policy.
Yeah.
Like everybody's...
They didn't let illegals vote. That's what cost us.
So big Hollywood has a take, too, and this is printed in the incredible words of Variety.com.
Oh.
Stop blaming celebrity endorsements for Kamala's loss. We need to hear from artists more than ever.
This is my favorite thing. Like the cast of General Hospital needs to weigh in on early vote. Like everybody's waiting. Everybody's waiting to hear what Delroy Lindo thinks about H-1B visas.
And the absolute like transparency of the situation of this is like brazen access journalism,
Right?
Where Variety's like, we need the publicists.
This is our
and
beat.
everybody for who we lean on to get stories. Variety does,
Right.
They're like, so we have to protect them, right,
Right.
guys? So we have to say, actually, Hollywood is good. We need to hear from them now more than ever.
I haven't seen a bigger protection racket in Hollywood since Harvey Weinstein. Hamburger
Hamburger and all. Oh, hamburger and all.
Don't put that in my head.
Oh, we talked about that. You have to go to the archives to figure out.
Don't Google
that.
that. Don't Google
You
that.
should go back and check it out. We had a lot to say about it. But listen to the lead of this, which is so. It's just.
I can't wait.
If you're a part of a disappointing election cycle, you can understand like what it is that they're doing here, and it's just so delicious. Did you know that Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce lost the election for Kamala Harris? Or at least bear large responsibility for her party's failure at the polls this year? It's true, you know. At least if you listen to some of the punditry coming from conservatives.
Oh, not those folks.
Even from some Democratic operatives eager to find celebs to push into the middle of their current circular firing squad.
And here's the funny thing is the reason that they want to point this out is because conservatives started pointing out that the Harris campaign was spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on these concerts of these celebrities.
Dude, but the funniest thing is they did that huge rally with Beyonce in Houston, I think it was.
Sing?
She didn't even sing. She didn't even sing. So you paid a premium to get to Beyonce there, and then you're like, you know what? The main act is Kamala Harris. You know?
Dude, I've also heard reports, and I haven't independently checked this. You guys may have, but like that Oprah had $1 million
I saw the same thing.
show up. Like they paid her $1 million to show up and do.
I've been told that's true.
When she said that, like it was something like women would have no rights and all of these other things. They paid her $1 million to come in and do that.
Here's the thing, I'd do it for $1 million.
Jeff, yes, if you're listening.
If you're listening, Jeff, what's on your mind? I'll talk about it.
Listening to some of these voices, you'd think that Harris could have won 6 or 7 swing states if only Beyonce hadn't shown up to deliver one single 4-minute rally speech.
4 minute?
Or if Taylor Swift hadn't devoted a singular 300-word Instagram post to the Harris endorsement. Imagine the more favorable electoral counts if only some of the most beloved pop culture figures in the world had kept their dirty traps shut. Right?
Beyonce got paid for 4 minutes. That's like better than Russell Wilson's contract by the minute. How many millions are getting paid?
Bro,
Dude,
think about
the best part about it, it's only like the constituency of this is the PR reps that actually
dude,
had
that's
to.
exactly what I was going to say. Think
Yeah.
about the brain melt. The publicists are like, we got to get on this.
Yeah.
we got to stick up for their rights.
Because like if you're sitting in like Beyonce camp or Swift camp or Oprah camp or whatever, you're like, boy, that wasn't a great idea.
Yeah.
You're like, we just eliminated 50 some odd % of the
Right.
market share just by virtue of being super aggressive in
Right.
this election. The PR guys are like, wow, wait till you hear from Variety.
Hey, Oprah, the check cleared, right? Okay, yeah, I'm going to shit all over these people.
But I mean, that is such a good point, Holmes. It was very short-sighted of these celebs to essentially light half of their fan base on fire and be like, no, we're going to jump in because people demand to know what I have to say. I want to alienate at least half of my listeners or supporters. And they didn't learn from Michael Jordan, who was like, Republicans buy shoes too.
That's exactly right, dude.
But it's also like since the beginning of time, you get people like Bruce Springsteen. Every 2 years in my adult life, he has showed up to do a rally for a Democratic candidate at the end of the election.
And his music has always sucked. But yeah.
See, I disagree. I
Yeah,
kinda,
he's
like
always
if you're a
sucked.
conservative and you try to pick what it is that you like based upon only what you agree with, like you got a short list.
I
right?
do. I like Kid Rock, and that's about it.
But like on the conservative side, anybody who steps out of line and says anything that could remotely be supporting, like they jump all over that person, they try to tarnish their career. I think the difference, and we talked about this a little bit in the office in the week leading up to the election, is there seemed to be a change a little bit. Not necessarily in the Hollywood side or, you know, music, although you got the like Morgan Wallens and folks like that out there who seem like very thinly veiled as to where it is that they are on stuff. But when you get Joey Bosa for the San Francisco 49ers wearing a MAGA hat post game, like what you'd worry about if you were Joey Bosa or his representatives is like, what does it look like when he walks back into the locker room? But a guy like Joey Bosa would never do that if he couldn't walk back into the locker room and people would be like, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
That's right.
And who's that college
that
player
was the change.
who after they caught a touchdown, they pulled up their jersey and it said, "Make America Great Again"?
Did you guys see all the touchdown dances?
Yeah, they were doing the Trump YMCA.
This weekend?
Yeah.
Like one of 3 touchdown dances in the NFL and college football were the Trump YMCA dance.
Yeah.
So good.
Like there is a change there that's happening. God bless it. If you're conservative and you're singing songs, singing, dancing, entertain like we do, let your voice be heard, folks. Let your voice be heard. It's a different day. So our question is, now that we've blamed everybody under the sun on the Democratic side, will you learn your lesson? Are these lessons going to be learned?
They're like, no, we will never learn.
Like and subscribe to the Variety Program, and we will read and all go through all of this. But based on the last week, do you think Democrats have learned their lesson?
Yeah.
That's a good
That's
question.
a critical question. I mean, that is the $1 million question.
And when we come back, we're going to get to your comments from last episode. But before we do, we have an announcement here from Z-Biotics.
Yes.
Let me just say I wouldn't have survived the last week without Z-Biotics, friends. I just wouldn't do it. So what Z-Biotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. Probiotic. It's a drink that we have come to embrace. They've been a sponsor of the program, and like anything that you get, you're skeptical of it. Especially it's like, oh, you're promising something that, you know, it deals with science and it's going to make me feel maybe less shitty after a night of drinking. Well, turns out it was 100% true. We did this thing during the convention.
Yes.
Where we really loaded up on this stuff.
Yeah. We went with cases of it.
Magic.
And here's the thing. I love when Z-Biotics is a sponsor because it comes from the heart. Like, if you're like us, you spent years, people are like, oh, if you drink 3 glasses of water before you go to sleep, oh, if you have Pedialyte, we all know none of that works. This actually does, to the point that, remember, I had a conference I had to go to right before the election. God's honest truth. I had someone message me who was going to be down there, and they're like, could you bring some of that Z-Biotics?
Wow.
Dead serious. And so I packed some Z-Biotics, handed him a couple, perfect in the morning.
Well, there's science
it really
behind
works.
this, though, right?
There's science behind this. What it does is Z-Biotics neutralizes the toxic byproducts in your gut that alcohol creates. So that's why, it's not just staying hydrated that keeps you from having that bad feeling after a big night. It's this toxic byproduct. And like, look, just to emphasize Smug's point, like, like you read like Car and Driver and like, they have someone go out and road test the car and then they give it the stars and all that sort of thing. When it comes to having fun and having beverages, we're like Car and Driver. You can trust that we have put Z-Biotics through its paces.
It's not just a road test, it's a stress test.
We have put it through its paces.
If anyone has gone 0 to however fast it can go and then slammed on the brakes and put it in a reverse 180 spin, it's the Variety Program.
Well, it works because it was developed by PhD scientists who know that gut health is very important. And we know that that's very important, and that's why we always say there is no tomorrow without Z-Biotics today.
It's well said. So you got to go to zbiotics.com/ruthless to learn more. You get 15% off your order when you use Ruthless at the checkout. That's Z-Biotics, back with 100% money-back guarantee. They don't give that away, by the way. 100% money-back guarantee. You only do that if you're very confident. Believe me, they've got a lot of reason to be confident in it. Money back guarantee. They'll refund your money with no questions asked if you don't like it. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/ruthless and use the code ruthless at checkout for 15% off. There is no tomorrow.
Without Z-Biotics today.
All right, we got to get back into your comments because you guys have just been absolutely on fire. Mm-hmm. And it's just so good. And so it's so like heartening to know how everybody's just been engaged in this thing. And we asked, turning the page a little bit, what are you looking forward to the most? Like, what are the things that Trump talked about during the course of the campaign that you think you're looking forward to the most? And we opened the mic for a like and subscribe. And here's what you had to say. To do that, we always start with a voice.
And remember, like and subscribe if you wish to opine.
Just came up with that.
Mm-hmm. We did. We coined it here on the Variety Program. First comment comes from Joey Durker. And Joey writes, "Howdy, fellas. Love the show. I'm most looking forward to Trump's 10-for-1 regulation reduction. I poured out a full water bottle going through TSA yesterday, and I really hope that one gets the axe." Yes. By the way, I'm workshopping a ruthless rock opera called Spaghetti and the Wolf.
Oh.
Behind the scenes, it's going to be a banger. Have fun, Joey.
Nice.
Great comment. I'd love to see that.
Is it a musical?
I hope so.
That's a rock opera.
Yeah. And I think he's got a great point. I mean, with the Z-Biotics, I was taking so much down to the conference. I didn't know, is it going to have to be like, is it going to be too much of liquid that you're allowed to carry? I had to check in luggage, and you know what that means.
Well, you check in,
The indignity.
You're rolling the dice.
Yeah.
What do you think the spaghetti side of the rock opera sounds like?
Kind of like Goodfellas, but with some tunes.
Goodfellas. Like Mamma Mia?
2
hours of that.
And then all of a sudden you get into Wolf, and it's just like hard rock. It's got to be like AC/DC or some Metallica, maybe some like, I mean, look, he's our veteran.
Yeah.
By the way, hats off to all the veterans. Veterans Day yesterday, we're huge fans. None of us would be here, and none of us would have an election, a free and fair election with the right outcome without you. Our resident on that is Wolf. We thank him a ton for his service, which is like we never forget here. He does logistics pretty well.
Yeah.
He fights wars really well. Mm-hmm. He fights wars really well, and we're always thankful for all of that. He and his family had great sacrifice, so thanks for that. Let's go to comment number 2, please, Dunks.
This one's from Mary Contrary. Mary writes, "I'm looking forward to energy independence and restoration of property rights for landowners in rural upstate New York, adjacent to Pennsylvania, who also have Marcellus Shale under their feet. With the Loper-Bright decision and Trump restored to his rightful place by the will of the governed, I hope he can sweep away the Cuomo-era ban on fracking to bring prosperity to upstate New York."
Mary, I got good news for you. He has thoughts on New York. He's got a lot of thoughts on New York. You may have to work a little harder to get into the property rights discussion, but if it has something to do with displacing New York leadership, I have a feeling he's got an open mind.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, comment 3, Smugglesworth.
This is from Mark Briggs, and Mark writes, "Question of the day. As a resident of the great state of North Carolina, go Wolfpack, go to hell, Carolina." Excellent. The thing I am looking forward to the most, other than a booming economy with lower inflation, no more endless wars, and a more secure border, is the fact that we will no longer be subjected to the fumbling, bumbling, stammering lies of the most incompetent person to ever serve in any administration. I am, of course, talking about Karine Jean-Pierre. No, I'm not taking the time to look up how to spell her name. Voice has become worse than nails on a chalkboard. Be gone, DEI hire.
Oh, man.
Brutal.
Man.
Brutal takedown.
Really
We don't pull punches in North Carolina.
Yeah.
No, you do not.
Not in the Wolfpack, that's for sure.
Well, and now you don't have to pull any. After you delivered the vote, and you got Chairman Whatley, and he's just riding high there.
Excellent.
Tar Heel State. Although you're a Wolfpack guy.
Yeah. Not Tar Heel State.
Yeah.
North Carolina.
All right, so we wanted to put a little bit. Let me just preface it by this. One of the reasons you trust us with information here on the Variety Program is that we have some experience in things. And we don't know all the answers, but we can weigh equities about the things that you see online, you don't see online, and whether they make a difference into what we collectively want to have happen. when you come out of an incredibly rewarding experience like it was last Tuesday, where everyone's on the same team, rowing in the same direction, you'll notice that there is all of a sudden a clamor and sort of an anxiety about like, who is it that's going to take advantage of this win? Mm-hmm. A lot of that is internal baseball, that people are positioning themselves for places within a Trump administration or positions in influence within Congress and whatnot. And you can have opinions, definitely have opinions. If somebody you think is the wrong, like, get out there, do whatever you do. But you ought to know sort of what has gone well, what they did successfully in the first 4 years, and what they need to improve upon in order to make the second 4 years for Donald Trump a hell of a lot better than not only the first four, but anything that we've ever seen, which is our expectation.
And I get the anxiety, right? Because like after you win, you wanna deliver for the voters,
Totally.
right? And like there's a lot of stuff policy-wise that the Trump administration wants to get accomplished, and policy is about having the right personnel, and so we're going to have a lot of fights here internally over the next few months about personnel.
Yeah.
And about what policy should be first. And so, I mean, that's fine. I think everyone should have their own opinion on that.
Let me preface it by saying you don't get to this level of politics where Donald Trump and his team are talking about you as a potential cabinet secretary or a staff of influence in the White House without going through a war to get there. Mm-hmm. You have tested yourself. And in order to win a war, which all of these people that are a part of this conversation are a part of, you're going to need to break some eggs. Mm-hmm. You got to break some eggs to make an omelet. So there's not a single person, whether they're talking about a potential Secretary of State or Department of Treasury or whatever, there's not a single person that doesn't have a detractor audience, because ultimately they wouldn't be in the conversation in the first place if you didn't roll over your critics in one form or another. Oftentimes that comes within segments of your own party to get it to happen. But that's ultimately what you want as a sort of supporter of not only President Trump's message, but an ability to get things done. Mm-hmm. You're going to need somebody who doesn't worry a lot about what people think of them. They're there to get the job done. So you're going to see a lot of discussion back and forth online where you have different groups, some of them may be paid for, some of them may not. I mean, there's the Trump campaign in and of itself, because it enlisted such a different audience of support, has expanded your online universe of the meaning of what it is that everybody's opinion is on all of these things.
Again, because he also won the popular vote. We're talking about now the number of people who are committed to this cause is larger than ever.
Yeah. So what I thought was the biggest warning sign coming out of 2020, when we lost that election and we were at the depths of depression, lost the Senate when we thought we had it, lost the House, was the idea that the Democrats had the whip hand in the message that Biden had, which is a caretaker who's going to restore sort of normalcy, which was at that point a winning message. And my fear was that he would actually implement components of that and just sort of try to break the Republican Party, right? Do what they were ultimately able to do with like the Liz Cheneys and the weakest links in the Republican Party to like the base of the Republican Party and beyond, to make people believe that like maybe the Republican Party didn't represent you at all. I think that Republicans have that opportunity because of the first two segments that we did in the show to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, we can permanently break them.
There are only two ways that doesn't happen and is not completely effectuated by Donald Trump, who is a much more gifted than any Democrat has ever had at just punching a hole in the coalition of the Democratic Party. The first is by fighting amongst them ourselves, right? Now, granted, there's always any fight worth having is you're going to get some contentiousness. And you're seeing that play out a little bit in like a Senate leadership race right now, where you've got, for the first time in 20 years, Mitch McConnell is not going to be leading Senate Republicans. And so they've now have three candidates You've heard from all of them here on the Variety program over the years. Senator from Texas, John Cornyn. Senator from South Dakota, John Thune. Senator from Florida, Rick Scott. And
4. There's 4.
Well,
I've been talking extensively about this. A lot of folks are on board this movement. Is the J.D. Vance for Senate Majority Leader? A lot of influential people. I've had, this movement kind of started when I put forward this idea because constitutionally J.D. Vance can be Senate Majority Leader.
Yes.
Mike Lee in the Senate has agreed. He stepped forward. A lot of great patriots are stepping forward and supporting this because the thing is it needs to be done. If you want to make sure that President Trump's agenda gets done, and there's no roadblocks in the way, we can't stick to old ways of, this is just the way things go. If you want bold leadership, bold decisions have to be made. And that's why, look, Dick Cheney had an office put in the Senate for himself as vice president. J.D. Vance should have the Senate Majority Leader's office in the Senate and just make sure that Trump's agenda is done. So a lot of people are on board this movement.
Can I tell you something though, just to level set?
Glenn Beck also jumped on with
this whole discussion. The Senate Majority Leader these next 2 years, it's going to be the hardest, most thankless job in Washington D.C.
It always has.
So regardless of who ends up with this job, it will be the most difficult because everybody, and I'm with you, I want everything accomplished on day one. Everything that Trump can't do with the stroke of a pen on executive action and all of that sort of stuff, you want all the rest of the agenda to get done. Because you got a limited period of time where people go back to their corners and it all gets sort of like the cement hardens on the entire thing. But it's going to be hard.
I say, I don't see this as we got 2 years to accomplish stuff before we have another election.
No.
We have 100 days.
Yep.
We have 100 days. I remember when Newt had the contract with America, and the first 100 days, we had to move the ball. And that's the situation we're in right now. We got to move the ball. And you look at President Trump told J.D. Vance, I'm giving you a mission. I need you to gut Tim Walz, fillet him like a fish on live TV. J.D. said, done. And it happened. And we need that same thing to happen in the Senate.
I love it. You know how much I love JD, and we've been talking about it from day one. I think the likelihood, because of the separation of powers issue that people have.
See, that's what I'm talking about. We can't get into this swampy roadblocks. There are no brakes on this train.
Becomes a little bit problematic. But let me just break down to you the equities that are involved in a decision like this. And I want to be very clear. I don't care. I am the furthest thing removed. I spent a decade plus of my life sweating every minute of these things, was involved in how they work and so was Ashbrook, and, learned a few things. And that's what I'm trying to
I'd say less that you don't care, but you don't have a horse in the race per se.
I don't.
You care about, the agenda.
I care deeply about the ability of the Senate to get done what President Trump needs to get done, which is why I have some things that you ought to sort of consider. Because I think, look, there's a whole movement, rightly so, on the conservative side that is you need somebody lock, stock, and barrel on a Trump agenda from day one that has no quibbles, no qualifications, that is there to just go get things done. I agree with that. But I actually don't think that you're going to have, at least in these candidates, I don't think you're going to have any daylight on any of that. I think there's a mandate from the American people, and I think all of these people wouldn't be in the conversation if they didn't read mandates correctly over the course of their careers. But secondly, the reason that the Senate is unique is that you've got a 60-vote threshold for the filibuster, which requires some bipartisanship for huge reforms, but you have things like taxes and nominees and other things that are only 51 that you need to get done. And with a 53-seat majority, I like our chances on an awful lot of that. But don't take it for granted. 53 is not 60. And what I would be looking at this from a Trump administration standpoint is, what can someone do as leader of the Senate that I can't do myself? In that the voice of Donald Trump, in and of itself, probably carries 49, 48, 49 votes, no matter what. Just by virtue of him speaking. The question is, how do you get those 3-4 votes at the end for the stuff that matters in order to get it over the finish line. And the reason I say that is you don't have to go far back. Like, look at his first term. The reason that we had the overturning of Roe, for example, property rights out of the Supreme Court, a generational change in how our judiciary operates. The reason we had all of that is because you not only had the best of Donald Trump and what he was able to do with galvanizing the grassroots, you also had inside operators who were able to figure out how to cajole their colleagues and get them to go along for the ride. And that is an equal parts proposition when you're effectuating the change that you're looking for. It's not enough to just declare loyalty to one thing or another, because there are 3 or 4 or 5 members, and there could be parochial concerns, personnel concerns, all these other things that pop up on a day-to-day basis that can't break through anything more than Donald Trump. But if you have somebody who has a relationship there, who has provided people with a reason to believe that they're acting in their best interest, you can get those last 2 or 3 votes to actually make things happen. Now, I'm not making a value judgment on who these candidates are, but that is an evaluation in and of itself. The second evaluation is everyone in the Senate is self-interested.
Yeah.
And their interest is, what are you doing for me? Like, what are my committee assignments? How much of a seat at a table am I going to get? Yada, yada, yada. There's 100 of them. All of them look in the mirror and think they see the next president of the United States. Not one of them thinks that they're like there just to sort of like do everybody else's work. They're statewide elected. Many of them swing state elected. And so they want that relationship piece of it as a part of it. So if you're looking at this in like the movement to be like, well, we need Rick Scott because Rick Scott's a true believer in the MAGA whatever, I'd urge you to do a little homework on that, because I'm not sure that's totally true. But secondarily, how much has he done for those people who are ultimately the majority makers on things like the tax package, on things like getting his attorney general confirmed, his treasury secretary confirmed, all the things that
Supreme
need
Court
to happen.
vacancies.
Supreme Court vacancies.
like what I think about, just to put a specific thing on it for listeners and viewers is like, who's going to get Susan Collins there on like a really big vote? And I understand a lot of people listening to this, you're like, wow, that's not my cup of tea. Well, she overperformed the partisan lean of Maine by like 20 points in 2020.
But more importantly, she's a voting member of the United States Senate, and you need her vote.
Right. You have to have her vote.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you get this entire conference together for the stuff that really matters? Because people, I get it from the outside looking in. You're thinking like, well, it's like the most conservative is the one for me. Well, in reality, the job is more like you're the average. You're the average mean of the entire conference, as everyone from Ted Cruz to Susan Collins, and you got to represent that and not put your members in a bad place or overpromise and underdeliver, and protect them and their ability to win re-election and things like that. There's a lot of other considerations to have in this. And so like, you want somebody who can make the tent as broad as possible for those moments in which we can really win.
If you're hiring for a job, do you hire for your strengths or your weaknesses?
Right. And then like, let's think about it on the other side of the Capitol. Yeah. I mean, you want the most conservative speaker possible, but like I'm checking the New York Times track the House. And, this majority, which will be a narrow majority, a Republican majority in the United States House of Representatives, is going to be built on overperformance in places like California.
Yeah.
Or like swing districts like Arizona 6, Juan Ciscomani, or like Democratic flips in the Denver suburbs, Colorado 8. And like those people are going to matter too if you want to have a governing majority for not just 2 years, but 4 years.
And I want to be clear, because we mentioned Susan Collins, this is not an ideological thing. Because oftentimes it doesn't come within like somebody who's in the soft center of of a conference. This comes from the conservative side.
Right.
And your ability to make sure that you've got all of those folks in place too. We saw it play out in 2017 during the tax cut debate, where you had people who were ultimately not on board with that because they thought it was a deficit problem.
And it'll happen again on immigration, probably.
It's going to happen on all of that. So my point is that before you get into this headspace where you're like, well, if they don't go with this candidate, they're giving up on the MAGA agenda. That is in my view, the exact opposite of the way it works. You're hiring to try to ensure the MAGA agenda gets done. Would it be okay with you if you had a true believer that you ran all the things that you absolutely believe into Congress and they were unable to get to 51 because the last 4 or 5 remaining from states that like didn't vote Trump are not on board with it, and you just came up short and you could complain about it and then you could primary them and lose the next election? What does that do for Donald Trump's 4 years? Doesn't do anything. Like, it hurts the president. It hurts him immensely. And all the stories are about how he couldn't get something done. So, like, maybe it makes sense to try to find somebody who has got the experience, who knows basically that, hey, your daughter graduated from high school, played on the softball team, is an intern at some outfit down in Arizona and does all of this. And, like, maybe this might be important to you for the following reasons. So let me make that case. Like, they've taken the time to learn about their people. Like, it does make a big difference.
And not for nothing, but the 2026 Senate battleground map, I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's really expensive. Georgia, if we want to flip Georgia. North Carolina is going to cost a lot of money to defend. Maine, again. This person also has to be a prolific fundraiser who can make sure that their colleagues can, fight and win in 2026. I mean, that's going to matter a lot to those folks that are up in cycle.
Which is, again, why I say J.D. Vance. No, like, listen, for all these reasons.
If that was possible.
Which is why I want Holmes, you to right now endorse J.D. Vance. I want Ashbrook and Duncan to do the same. We don't have time. We don't have time to go with the standard, here's how things go in D.C. We have to make the bold move, and that's with J.D. Everything that you have outlined has made J.D. sound like even more the perfect candidate. I hope all the senators who listen, all the staff of all the senators.
I do not want to do that to J.D.
Do you know who the single person who most objects to this is? J.D.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The
one guy
the
on the face of the play was
he's like,
Smug, shut the F up.
I did my job.
Needs him. The country needs him.
This is worse than the frozen fish.
This is worse than the frozen fish.
All right, couple things of variety. That's just our take on all of that. I just wanted to give you the information because, look, you can disagree with this if you want, but that is what it is, and ultimately the way it's going to be selected. Either way, this is done in a week. The job about getting everything done lasts for the next 4 years. So, like, don't get hung up on that shit. It's ridiculous. It's all like whose office is where, what committee assignments you get. Like, that's just, it's a nonsensical thing that you shouldn't get wrapped up on. Did you guys know about the North Korean soldiers? This just came to my attention today.
I did. I that's why I threw it in the Slack.
I mean, this is
a hell of a story.
So you guys,
this is some great variety.
It was lost amongst the end game of the election, but everybody was talking about how these North Korean soldiers showed up on behalf of Russia, getting ready to go into Ukraine, and like everybody's like, "Holy shit! Like this is a big geopolitical issue." Well, it is or it is not, because according to the New York Post, the North Korean soldiers are hooked on porn after getting internet access for the first time while helping Russia to fight Ukraine. Well, I mean, look, hardened soldiers indeed, as the New York Post starts.
It's just amazing. It's like you take these people who have lived under the worst conditions possible. I mean, you hear these stories of what life is like in North Korea, and it's like they get internet access for the first time. We're talking about all of the world's knowledge throughout history at your fingertips. And they're like, no, I know what I want to find.
Dude, this is a line that just is not going to go away unless I read it. These soldiers have engaged in a battle of the bulge since gaining free use of the internet.
Of course, it's New York Post. Of course.
I mean, you gotta be kidding. A usually reliable source tells me that the North Korean soldiers who have deployed to Russia have never had unfettered access to the internet before. As a result, they are gorging on pornography, wrote Financial Times Foreign Affairs commentator Gideon Rockman in an X post. Well, that seems like a...
That'd be really funny if that became like a new roadmap, for the Pentagon.
Send them internet.
Well, like if we're ever going to have to invade a country, we just like hook up Starlink in their country and we just get them all, masturbating when we invade.
They're like, yeah, later. Later. All right. So the second piece of Variety loops in a bunch of things that we talk about here on the Ruthless Variety program. One is discount airlines.
Uh-oh.
The other is animals. And it all came together in the LaGuardia airport, which we've had thoughts on as well. This is according to X.com, the raw alerts count. Watch as chaos and shocked travelers witness a wild moment as a raccoon falls from the ceiling at LaGuardia Airport. Can we play that clip, please, Spaghetts?
Of course, it's Spirit Airlines.
Whistles.
Look, this raccoon saw what happened to Peanut. He saw what happened to Peanut's buddy Frankie or Freddie or whatever.
Now's my time.
And he's got to get out of there.
Well, yeah, for our audio-only listeners, what you saw there was a raccoon hanging from, a hole in the ceiling tiles from some cables, almost like he's swinging in a hammock.
Yeah.
And yeah, got on the floor and got out of there. But, I have some experience with these beasts. Okay, and I hear
Are you
them...
talking about with raccoons or spirit passengers?
But they're all blowing whistles and scaring the damn thing. All you need is a seared, tuna steak, a little salt and pepper, and you put that in a trap, and that raccoon would walk right in. They're really dumb animals.
Well, in spirit.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I would guarantee if it boarded a plane, the raccoon would be the best behaved, cleanest passenger on that Spirit Airlines flight. Everyone knows what you get if you sign up for a flight on Spirit. So, and also if you're flying out of LaGuardia. I mean, that is the most jacked up airport probably in the country.
I thought they actually made some renovations to LaGuardia, right?
Yeah, and you have to walk 20 miles across this it
is a long walk.
Walkway where it's all just Governor Cuomo quotes of look what I have built you. Look at the skyline you can see from here, and you just see some homeless guy taking a shit. Right? Yeah, nice work out there. That renovation, it's still a shitty, horrible airport. I mean, look, you saw it yourself. You got raccoons swinging around in the place. That's what you're getting with your renovations.
I knew I'd get them going with the renovation.
Yeah, I do it.
Yeah.
And this is why we do it.
Yeah.
We know our friend.
I would never fly Spirit Airlines because of the animals, and now you see them in more ways than one. Now, literally, it's animals at Spirit Airlines.
We got to get to our interview. You're actually going to get real information out of this. This guy's the absolute best. He's been doing it forever. Jose Mallea, CEO of Libre. So, look, a topic on many people's minds. This has changed demographic and how Trump was able to not only win, but win with a margin, win the popular vote. A lot of focus has gone into what has happened with the Latino vote. Hispanics across this country, we've seen this building over time. And who better to talk about that than this next guest? It's brought to you by AFP. Jose Mallea, how are you, sir?
It's great to be here, guys. Doing well.
CEO of Libre, and you put a lot of work into this for an awful long time. You've been in the political business for, two plus decades.
Yeah, definitely, man. Seems like yesterday. We were young men. I had a lot more hair, which is why I decided to, pull on the hat. On top of the fact that it's super cool. Yeah. You guys hooked me up with a really awesome hat. Now I don't look bold. I looked at myself on the screen. I was like, what happened? These lights are too bright.
Yeah, right. This is too high def for any of this.
Come on.
But listen, for those of us who know you've been involved in the game for a very long time, but you have put all of your talents and expertise as a CEO of Libre into turning out Hispanic voters across this country, and we had made incremental progress for a long time. This really paid off this cycle.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think back and, you could almost say at 24, 25 years ago, I started doing this stuff, but 12 years ago, I joined Libre the first time around, right? When they first started, 2011, joined them in 2012. It was early back then.
Yeah.
We were just talking to people about why we needed to reach out to Latino.
I remember
why.
I was at the conference.
Oh, were you at the?
I was at the conference
back in the day. Yeah, when they first sold out. Yeah,
and everybody was like, "Yeah, that's a great
no
idea."
No brainer. So thankfully, we have this amazing community of partner supporters that were like, "We got to go all in." But then the hard part came, which is we got to get into these communities and build trust with people. Yeah. Like they need to know that we're not just some fly-by-night political shop. The committees are known for going in and then breaking it down. we were there to tell them, hey, we care about you. We're going to show you that there's a better way forward, and the dream that you came here, that your parents came here with, is still alive, right? But this is what you have to think about. These are the issues that you got to get involved with: educational choice, free market, free enterprise, all these other things that we promote. And it started to pay off. With time, people were like, yeah, these guys aren't just a bunch of political characters.
They don't go away.
They don't go away. We do things for the community, right? So the left, as we know, for a long time, has been in these communities, right? They've been in minority communities playing these, politics of ethnicity and trying to pit one group against the other. And then what they try to do is get folks to depend on government, right? They tell them, listen, the only way you're going to get ahead in this country is by taking these government programs, by depending on government. And sometimes people don't feel natural doing that. They might need it, they might not, but a lot of folks are like, man, I don't really want to do this, but they're telling me this is what I have to do. We show up, right, after decades of that, and we're like, there's a better way. Rely on yourself. Go out there and make it the way that you wanted to make it when you got here, when your parents got here, whatever. And it started to pay off, and we started to see some of that, slowly but surely building. And
it strikes a chord with these multi-generational communities that have built themselves up in their own lot in life and understand that what they're selling has certainly not worked out.
Right. And then that's what they started to figure out. Like, we would go to places that would tell us, listen, 2 generations ago, this place was thriving. People were working. All these great things were happening. Some folks started to get involved in some of these political movements from the left. Our community is torn up. We have people who have addiction issues. We have huge unemployment, and 70% of our town is now relying on government assistance, right? Whereas before we didn't have that, and so they've lived it. It's easy to go to that person and say, well, there's a better way. It sounds difficult, sounds impossible right now, but if you commit yourself to these policies and you vote for candidates and you get involved in these kinds of issues, you can make your children's lives better.
I think it's also a testament to the work you've done over time, because rarely, although, look, Trump has done big things with segments of the communities that seem like an overnight change, like Blue Dog Democrats in rural areas in 2016 or young men in 2024, where you see like seismic shifts. But what you've been doing in Latino communities has been paying off cycle by cycle by cycle. And like, I'm old enough to remember when the 2012 election went down and Democrats drove this narrative that Republicans were forever going to be a monolithic, largely Southeast regional party that didn't have any capacity of appealing to growing segments of the electorate.
Demographics is destiny.
Yeah, demographics is destiny is what they said. And then you saw like the RNC at the time sort of adopting all of these bizarre, like, oh, we've got to go out and reach out. But like, this is the world that you've lived in. And as you were just explaining, what Libre has done and what it's done under your leadership is not leave these communities, but continue to explain why it is that the policies of the Republican Party have benefited and will benefit you much more in the future. And like, we now, just in this election cycle, hit an all-time high.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be incredibly rewarding.
Look, it feels amazing. And honestly, look, the credit goes to the grassroots team. You guys have all been there. You know what it's like.
Totally.
Those people that were just breaking their backs to knock on doors. We were out there for, Senate candidates.
And they don't do it for stock options and retirement plans.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, they're doing it for a better country.
And those guys, man, like, and I told them when we had our last call, I was like, listen, you might be in a state that you just came short, or you might be in a state where you did something incredible. Every single one of you has contributed equally to this movement. Because if it's not today, it's going to be the next one.
Yep.
And this work that you've done, knocking on those doors, getting that community engaged, showing them that there's a better way than what they've heard from even, the only mainstream media in the Hispanic community is very liberal leaning, right? The 2 major networks, there's no alternative. But even what they've heard in the news, you found a way to get to them and show them that there's a better way, there are better candidates, and we saw the end result. But our work's not done, right?
And it's up and down ballot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an awful lot of people that would try to, like, you look at top lines and you're like, well, this is because of this. But when you do this for a living and you watch up and down ballot movement towards the Republican Party, something's happening there.
Right.
And it's happened over a couple of cycles. This one finally broke through. And I think it goes to the credit what it is that you're talking about. It's not about a single personality, a single movement, a single thing. Like, people are just looking differently at this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see some of the like the ones that blow me away are places like, the counties in Texas. They've gotten a lot of coverage, right? I believe Zapata County and some of these other ones that are historical. We're talking 100 years, never voted Republican in a presidential election, very blue. And as they became even predominantly Mexican American counties, they were still very blue, right? It was tradition. Like, I have friends, Daniel Garza, our president, being one of them, who lives in Mission, Texas. I remember going down there and people are like, man, yeah, we like your ideas, but our families have been Democrats for 2 or 3 generations. It's in our blood. It's our heritage. It's hard to break that. And like you mentioned, you saw it last cycle with, Mayra Flores, right? Yep. And then Monica de la Cruz, and then Tony Gonzalez. And now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like the majority of the Valley is represented by Republican members.
Yeah, there's that one district in Texas that's 97% Hispanic that voted Republican. And we got to play you this clip from The View on how the left has been handling that.
We've been saving this. It's one of our favorites.
So we've got to play this.
And finally, we talk a lot about these different demographics and these assumptions of where they're going to go. Latinos in Texas, a district that's 97% Latino, went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border.
It's misogyny.
Crisis is on their doorstep.
So
and they were begging people to care about it for years. We need to take some lessons.
That's what that was.
The lessons are not misogyny.
Let me tell you, man. If you guys ever want to meet the biggest bunch of mama's boys, go hang out with some Latino friends. Like, we are the last furthest from misogynist.
Right.
Like, our adoration for our mothers,
right,
which then extends to our sisters, our wives, it's a different culture. So when people say that, they're just driving them further away.
Hey, it's incredible, but it seems to be monolithic on the left. I mean, the reaction is, what was the Scarborough thing that we played last week? Where it was like, well, it looks like we have a real misogyny problem with.
I saw it. Yeah, it was crazy. And with Al Sharpton going back and forth and talking about calling Latino man like rape. It's crazy.
It's wild.
It's wild because that's the only card they've been able to play for such a long time on the white community.
And it didn't deal.
Right. And now they're like, well, it's got to be it. It can't be because we have bad ideas, because the economy's not working for people, because the solutions we've offered made it worse. Right? No, it's got to be because they're just, they hate it.
It's funny if you take a step back and you're like, look, you can't vote for Republicans because they're racists and they're sexists. And you keep on driving that over and over and over and over and over again. And then it turns out like people vote for Republicans and you're like, well, it's tougher to call them racist.
No, they'll find a way.
Yeah.
So I guess sexist. I guess that's what you got to be.
By the way, most Hispanics are like, what does that mean? Misogyny? I'm ashamed to say it. I grew up here. I had to look up the definition. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what are you calling me?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man. And I just, they can keep doing that all they want.
It just doesn't work. One of the things that I think we appreciate about your organization and what you've done, and it's a credit to your background and the commitment that people have at Libre to getting this done, is not treating the Latino vote as if it's monolithic, as if everyone who speaks Spanish
thinks the same way.
Somehow the same.
Yeah.
And like you've got, South Florida, which I know you've got a ton of background in. That's probably the most conservative group of folks you're ever going to meet your entire life.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And that's different than Puerto Ricans. It's different than Mexicans. It's different than Venezuelans. And it's the idea that people are all different and that they think differently, even within pots the Democrats put them in of where you're from.
No. They're all the same, and it's called Latinx.
Which is the craziest thing. Like I when that first came out, again, same thing. I didn't even know that people were using this term. And I would go to events in Miami, like, anybody says that Latinx word, we're going to kick you out of here. It's like, we don't know what that is, who that is. That is garbage, So when the Puerto Rico comment came, I went out to do some press, and I was on on Univision, right, the biggest Spanish channel, one of their biggest political shows. This liberal Democrat analyst is there. He's like, they just offended Hispanics. How could you sit there and how could you defend those views? Because, Puerto Ricans, and they called them garbage and this and that. And I said, listen, man, you have very little faith on the intelligence of Puerto Ricans. You are offending them by saying that they're going to cast their vote in the consequential presidential election and Senate races and congressional races based on a comment that a comedian made at Madison Square Garden. Come on, you know how bad we insult each other. You know the atrocities that I've said to my Puerto Rican friends, because we make fun of each other. Like Cubans rib on Puerto Ricans. We make fun of Dominicans. You know, even yesterday I was talking to a guy, and we had like 3 of us on a call. They were like, "Hey, listen to this." A Cuban, a Mexican, and a Puerto Rican are walking through a room, and because all 3 of us were on the line, right? And he said some off-color joke. So it's what we do. So no one was going to go and like burn the house down because some comedian called them garbage. I mean, it's offensive to me. Like the guy was so adamant, and I was sitting there just staring at him like, you can't be serious.
Well, and look at the results. Look at Osceola County, this largest Puerto Rican county in Florida, I believe, and I think Trump increased his margin by like 14 points.
Yes, which is huge. Is huge.
Yeah.
And even Puerto Ricans are different within their community. Osceola County, for the most part, Puerto Ricans who came from the island, some that came from the Northeast. But then Allentown, Puerto Ricans that are traditionally from the Northeast, that second generation, third generation, after being in New York and these really liberal cities, moved to Allentown. Those are the ones that are even more impressive to me, because eventually that's going to spread to New York. That's going to spread to New Jersey and all these other places.
And you guys saw this very early on because you're in the communities. You have an incredible team. Izzy Ortega is a buddy of mine.
He's so cool. Yeah,
great dude. Yeah. And you have just thousands of volunteers out there knocking doors, working in communities. So you were hearing this in conversations at doorsteps ahead of the election. I wonder if there's anything that sticks out in your mind from early conversations at these doors.
Yeah, so that's the key to the effort. You know, AFP, which is our sister organization, we rely on the old-fashioned knocking, pounding the pavement, getting to those doors, talking to people. When we do that, like people immediately, when you're selling something that doesn't work, you know immediately. Yeah. Someone slams that door in your face, they tell you to go away. But when we would knock on those doors and people would open them, they're like, what are you talking about? So we start to talk about, sometimes it was Bidenomics talking against it. Sometimes it was something else. And they would say, oh, yeah, we're with you. We're voting against Biden. We're going to vote for Trump. And we would have to stop them like, wait. What about Sam Brown? Who's that? Yeah. I'm like, oh, he's running for Senate. You know, what about Dave McCormick? Oh, yeah, tell us about him. Oh, by the way, we're doing an event with him, next week. You should come by. And I will say this.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. And then they were like, oh, who are these guys? And so we're like, you got to get involved. You got to vote in those races. Dave McCormick, Bernie Moreno, Mike Rogers, Hovde, and Sam Brown. All of those guys they were awesome. Those guys went to our events, and they were amazing in the community. Mike Rogers received a majority of the Hispanic vote in Michigan. Yeah. Real shame he didn't make it. Yep. But McCormick, Moreno, all these guys, I am excited that they've been elected. They're going to be great members, but the fact that they were so engaged with the community, right? Yeah. It wasn't like we're just going to run some ads. I'm going to try to speak Spanish on some wacky radio, which, by the way, never works. Right. I tell Kaz all that, don't do that. No, it's the weirdest thing.
Hola, mi nombre
es, no, don't do that. I'd rather you speak in English and get some other guy to translate. But anyway, we're done. But look, I'm excited about that because the more of those kind of candidates that we have that won, now they're going to go tell that story to the next generation of candidates. They're going to go on the stump, and they're not afraid. That's the thing. Do not be afraid to go into the community. No one's like, the minute you show up, people are going to embrace you. They're going to welcome you.
People
and then,
know now. Because of all this work, they know you're not there just for their votes. You're there to listen.
You're there to listen. That's right.
That's right. And I think that's the biggest change in the Republican Party is that this isn't just a cyclical thing. Where people are like, can I get the 51? And I need, so many of these people, so I'll go.
Yeah, then you fold up shop and go away.
And that's the biggest distinction between the Republican and Democratic Party with this particular community is that you're not just there on election day. Mm-hmm. Like, you actually care.
Yeah.
And it's worthy of investing and getting deep into it and ensuring that this is a part of your coalition going forward, which is, look, I am sad, too, that those guys, number of them didn't get over the top. But what they built, they helped build with you, is whoever follows them in a Senate seat or a statewide seat or a presidential election knows that they're building on top of what it is that they committed to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's why we made that comment, right? That's what we keep telling our team. Stay in the fight.
Yeah.
What you did, it's going to pay off. Like, this is the second round, the third round. These are body blows. When you get to the last round, you'll see this all pay off.
So what does the future for Libre look like here in the next year, the policy fights, and a 2026 midterm in which a lot of people came out in 2024 for the first time.
That's right.
And voted.
So a couple of things. So on the policy fight side, and we have an amazing group of partners. I know Brent Gardner was here recently, right?
Yeah.
He's a genius when it comes to like policy and understand this stuff. We have a team member, Helder, who's part of his team that works with us. We're going to work with these members, these new members, to explain to them why it's so important now that we do the right work.
Yeah, let's deliver on the promises.
We got to deliver on these promises.
Yep.
Like people are not dumb. Like you can get their vote, but in a way, with some of these communities, we're renting their vote. Right? These are independent voters.
Trust but verify.
Right. Exactly. Who had never voted before for Republicans. Some had never voted at all, especially the young males, right, that came out. But now you got to show them that you were worthy of earning their vote. So let's go out there, deal with these really important issues around the fiscal cliff, right? Which I know he dove into some of that in that last episode. We polled recently, and we asked general population, but we had a big segment of Hispanic voters, what their idea was the best way to get out of the problem that we have, the deficit. And they said grow the economy. Taxes was like 15%, right? And Democrats, taxes was maybe like 35%, which I was surprised. 60% of Democrats, like 80% of all Latino voters, economic growth. They get it. Yeah. So that's what we need. We need to pass policies that are pro-economic growth, not increase taxes. Get rid of regulation. I think that'll be the very biggest challenge that Congress will have to face, which we know is not an easy thing with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and a bunch of other stuff. But that's what's going to pay off in the long term for the midterm. And then for the next general election cycle. Well,
Jose, we are very lucky to have you and your organization and the commitment of your organization to try to do this on an incremental basis where we have a bust-through night like we did a week ago. And ultimately, who knows what the road brings, right? I mean, this could be a generational change.
Absolutely, and we're gonna keep growing, right? We're in 13 states. There's no reason we can't be in 20.
Yeah,
right. Because these communities are popping up throughout the country, and we need to get to them now before the other guys do, poisoning the well.
Yep, absolutely. So if people want to get involved, where do they go?
Yeah, they can go to BeLibre, BeLibre.org, the Libre Initiative in English. .org, and then social media, Libre Initiative on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. Like, that's the best way to engage with us.
Dude, you're the man. Thank you
guys
for doing this.
Thank you guys
Congratulations.
For doing this. Thank you guys. Yeah, and congrats to you. 4 years?
Yeah.
Amazing, man. I mean, you guys got to take some credit too. Like, we got to throw some flowers your way here because this is the way. Yeah, man, and this is awesome. We need more of this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
What a great guy.
Yeah, such a good dude. He's been at it for a long time. He's a bona fide operative, unlike the Democratic side where they plug people in who just sort of looks like you and they're like, oh, hey, this guy looks like you, so you should vote. Like, this guy has done the hard work of Republican organizing for his entire life, and he is noteworthy beyond Latino turnout, Hispanic. Like, he's very good at his job no matter what. The fact that he's dedicated to this and they've done it over time, I think he said for himself, like, you can see real results. And I think we're only going up here, fellas.
And what a credit that we can have someone speak with their expertise on this topic while the Dems are in circular firing squad being like, Latinos must be white supremacists.
Yeah.
This is why Republicans are making inroads.
It's true.
It's so good. So remember, we got a question of the day. Will the Democrats learn their lesson? It's a good transition from what you just heard out of Jose. Yeah. I doubt it. Doesn't seem like it so far, but give us your thoughts. You got to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Remember, when you're on there, check out the merch stuff because we're going to have holiday offerings, including a table setting that you are not going to want to miss. It's something that's absolutely essential for our Thanksgiving episode. With that, fellas, wonderful week. I think we did it.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode. Gentlemen, remember, listeners, support J.D. Vance for Senate Majority Leader. And thank you so much, Jose Mallea. And thank you, listeners. So until next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Thursday. Stay ruthless.